What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. The Clash of the Titans, Dynasty, NYXL, some of the best players in the entirety of Overwatch League coming to a head. The Twitch viewership for this match was through the roof, and for good reason. These guys put on one heck of a show, and we're going to try to break down the key engagements and plays that led to one of these teams going on top. Before we get into the analysis, I have a few things that I do want to shout out. One, quite proud that I did predict this match to go the way that it did, and although I happily do lean into any bad prediction streaks I go on, last week I was 10-2 in predictions. Quite proud of myself on that. I've yet to see anybody who beat that for week 3. If you want to keep track of my predictions in real time prior to the matches going live on Twitch, head over to @YourOverwatchYT. We can enjoy the games together and discuss what's going on. We also tweet out dank memes and cool clips, things like that. But also as well, a lot of you have been asking for like weekly recap analysis type content. I don't think we're going to put anything like that necessarily on the Your Overwatch channel, but on my personal channel, I do it more in vlog form, which is an easier medium to quickly get out thoughts about what's going on in the league and predicting what's going to happen for the upcoming week. That's on my personal YouTube account, which is linked in the description, which also has the VOD reviews that I'm doing twice a week. Long intro, I know, I apologize for that, but we're going to jump right in to the highest ranked Overwatch head-to-head we have seen in Overwatch League thus far. And straight out the gate, you probably would have guessed that Seoul Dynasty would kind of be favored to win Eichenwald, seeing as Lunatic High has historically pulled off miraculous plays in their tenure as a esports team. But NYXL really dictate the pace of how this is going to work, coming out with a static Orisa Hog defensive tank line, which more or less creates a fortress on the point that Seoul Dynasty is going to kind of struggle to break. All the while, Libero is on man-on-man coverage of the star player Fleta, who the casters and analysts, rightfully so, mind you, were really hyping up his Pharah play. His Pharah statistics are insane. However, Libero responds with a very confident set of plays on this defense and fearlessly goes after the duel against Fleta, forcing him to eventually swap off the Pharah. Okay, Fleta, you a goon, but what's a goon to a goblin? Libero definitely was looking to make up for his rather poor performance head-to-head against Shatterburn in the Fusion matchup. And all through these 5 maps, Libero was really popping off when he was playing that projectile hero, whether it's Pharah or Genji. Just keep him off the soldier, okay? So my NYXL predictions can stay strong where they're supposed to be. And in general, there is a principle that the attacking Pharah struggles to come into the space of the defending Pharah, because since the air-to-air matchup is based on predictions, well, if you know you can lead your target towards the objective where they want to eventually be, you have a higher chance of hitting direct rockets. And sniffing out Fleta is what stifles these first few pushes from Dynasty until Fleta realizes, oh yeah, I'm the best DPS player in the world, finally goes and wins the duel against Libero. That's going to crack open the point. Ults fly back and forth. They're going to end up taking first. Now, to some degree, I think this series really is going to make us question how powerful Fleta actually is. Because throughout this matchup, there was moments of absolute brilliance, especially on his Widowmaker, where he's hitting the hardest possible shots that you can imagine. But at the same time, he seemed to kind of get overwhelmed with the suffocating man-on-man DPS play that either Libero or Saebyeolbe press onto the Dynasty's DPS core. Granted, this might also reveal that his co-partner DPS can't really cut the mustard, which is going to be happening off-screen over and over again. It's a lot of these frags that we don't see happen that I really want to sort of piece together how Saebyeolbe finds them, but it was getting so bad that they took Munchkin out, put Bunny in later in the series, and nobody really seemed to find any space with the suffocating mind games play that the combination of Saebyeolbe and Libero can impose onto a more or less passive team like the Seoul Dynasty. And speaking of criticizing passive play, I really have to take another look at this call by Fleta, because there was a massive missed opportunity to actually do a full rotate. And if you haven't seen something like this in Pro Overwatch yet, you might think that what I'm about to call here is a little bit crazy, but I've definitely seen many pro teams, especially Korean teams, when a big flank comes up around to backstab to rob this ranged high ground like the NYXL are doing in this full dive comp they swap to. Well, Fleta tries to go for a backstab on the backstab, right? He weaves down under, tries to pop up in order to get a snipe on the Zenyatta, but we saw all the tanks and everybody coming down this lane. Unless New York largely left this high ground abandoned after they took it, FREEDO was just going to be doomed to be stuck in his zone over here, zoned himself out, whereas think about the rotation that Dynasty could have took while NYXL is using their short range, mind you, dive comp to come take this high ground. Well, having the high ground doesn't do a whole lot for NYXL really, other than having Jonak, I guess, fire his lethal Zen balls from afar, but largely speaking, Dynasty could have held the cart and actually rotated into the natural defender's point of view, putting FREEDO even on top of these very useful perches way up here. What I'm saying is there's no reason that Dynasty had to feel that they had to peel back so far to allow this dive comp to get into close range. Tracer, Genji, dive tanks, they want to be fighting you here. And catching the dive with a Widowmaker doesn't really make sense. The Widow has to outposition them and try to get a ranged angle, not come back and get a close range one. And I actually think if they did that crucial repositioning on either of the times where this counter engage came in, because they're going to do the same exact thing again, since Dynasty didn't seem to know how to adjust to this, it's just going to burn all the attacking time, and they didn't have much, obviously. It took a few minutes to even get first. Coming into streets, only get a few fights as well. The counter engage to either take out the backline or FREEDO himself was just too strong, and they never could find their footing. But going into the attacking side for the NYXL, there's a chance that Dynasty is going to be able to hold. But it's here that the passive tendencies of Dynasty in general, but particularly Kuki, who I was starting to become a real fan of, but I think really let us down in this Dynasty matchup, where they're trying to just catch aggression, but the problem is NYXL is coming out with the insanely greedy Roadhog and Diva combo that they're going to exploit later in the series as well. And there's just no initiative to want to engage and commit anywhere. Granted, it feels impossible as a Winston player to dive into two tanks that have shotguns attached to them, but you gotta find something, you gotta engage somewhere, especially since we know that in the Zen Mercy mirror match, where do you want to be? Do you want to be catching an engagement, or do you want to be throwing your resources aggressively towards them, forcing them to peel? Well, that's obviously the better option. We've covered that at great length in previous pro analysis videos, so I won't harp on it too much, but you definitely don't want to just let them have all this space, let all their damage hit your face. They just overwhelm the fight, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. In fact, I would go one step further, that if the Dynasty want to play this passively, why not have the Orisa Hog? You can just set up, let them come towards you, and you have ranged threats, crowd control, and you don't have to worry about thinking about going and counter-engaging if you don't want to. I pinpoint this here because it's actually going to be a big issue, and this philosophy difference just really falls apart. Nobody is touching Jonak this entire time, the world's best Zenyatta, by the way. Instead, the Dynasty tanks are trying to counter-engage to catch the engagement from the NYXL, which they largely do. Now, the brawling goes back and forth, but the issue is, even though NYXL ended up losing this particular fight, they got a ton of cart progress, because of course if you're fighting on the defensive, it's pretty hard to contest the cart because you're trying to catch the engagement. It like naturally gives up cart progress. So all in all, it's a win from NYXL. And even going into this last engagement, the rules of this prove true again. If the engagement happens in your backline, rather than forcing it into the enemies, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So much so, even Mano is lighting up the kill feed with the help of a bit of a damage boost from Arc. Cleans up a team fight, but of course the Dynasty are going to get a big stall fight coming through. We've seen Lunatic High clutch out this Streets phase many times in the past, but I'm sure NYXL has seen that game film as well, and they're able to put their resources appropriately to quickly frag down the stallers. On the retake, Dynasty are able to find a frag, use their Transcendence, but they use the cart as cover, waiting out that Transcendence largely. Then they pop the Valkyrie. Arc goes Heroes Never Die all over them, gets the res back up, and with the help of Damage Amp through a Genji slash, pulling out the Dragon Blade, cleans up the entire cart, and they just switch this fight entirely by having the proper patience to outlast the Transcendence even in a fair fight, waiting out the effectiveness of that ability, then popping the perfect Valkyrie, getting the team back up, using Damage Amp to charge their ultimates. Most importantly, Liberal's Genji gets like 10 ult charge off one dash, which is pretty good, aided by the Damage Amp, of course. Dragon Blade comes out, cleans up, the rest is history. Eichenwald goes the way of NYXL. Reeling after that loss, we're heading on to Horizon, and the Dynasty don't disappoint on this map. Their engagements were kind of odd on Eichenwald. I think the way that they want to take them is fundamentally incorrect, noting the strengths of this meta, but their more slower, patient, methodical set engagement tendencies work a lot better onto 2CP. And also as well, the map type really allows us to witness some of the classic Dynasty adaptation to overcome strategies that originally beat them. Horizon Lunar Colony was a bit of a slugfest between both teams. Very long map. You're going to want to check out the live stream that I do covering this game in order to get a lot more of the depth out of this map. It definitely deserves it. Ton going on. But in this video, we're going to give you the most key plays to look at. On the attack, NYXL bring out the Slambulance, as I've told I have to call it. I'm gonna keep calling it quad tank, okay? Slambulance sounds kind of silly, but I'd hate for the Overwatch fashion police to arrest me for naming it anything other than the preferred name. It rolls through first. We've seen it roll through first. I think I saw a tweet from Bren, who's on the analyst desk. When our team's just going to open with a Reaper pick on defense so they don't get steamrolled by this type of comp? I hope we see it, but what we normally don't see is the perfect ult usage required to make this quad tank not fail miserably on second. And I think NYXL have the right idea here. Don't hold on to these ultimates too long. You need to burst them quickly to get an advantage, otherwise the respawns are just going to start overwhelming you. If you have to use those abilities to get minimal amounts of impact, go ahead and do it, because the quad tank's going to look a lot worse once the defense is allowed to set up. So Mano pops down the hammer down, Sabioli blows his cooldowns, then pops up the whole hog, slam and wham, a few frags come off the board, they're able to clear the squishies off the point, which guarantees a few ticks. This is already a bit of a win, but in the chaos, Libero also gets the Graviton Surge, which quite notably, because Jaehong for whatever reason is on Ana at this point, they're not going to have any defensive ult whatsoever to withstand in this situation. I mean, yeah, they do have the Valkyrie, but as long as Sabioli plays great on Roadhog, they're going to be able to burst down frags anyway, which he was, and they do. The brawl continues, fight goes on. Dynasty have like no hope at this point, post Graviton to even come back. Sabioli's playing so well, he gets another whole hog, which helps get frags, clears things off the point, CCing them away from all of the big boys in the quad tank and girls. Don't be mad at me, Zari. I know how much you can deadlift. At that point, NYXL's at a massive advantage to just take this whole map, but it's at this point in the game, I advise anyone playing the Dynasty that you reevaluate everything you know about 2CP, because the Dynasty knows how to adapt. Even with the smaller time bank, they utilize their EMP and Primal Rage to delete the backline, get Fleta into position with the Widowmaker in the high ground, and that's all she wrote. Almost no one does set engagement plays better than the Dynasty, and that's going to be a done deal. They secure their 4th point. It was nice to see on the NYXL follow-up attack that they do put a wrinkle in this strategy. They hide the Widowmaker in the back, don't show her immediately, instead take all of their tanks up the gut towards the point like they did prior to this point, which does bait the proper response to give Sabioli a line of sight. He kind of whiffs his shot onto the Mercy. That would have made this fight even easier, but because Sol wasn't prepared to deal with the Widowmaker line of sight anyway, they had no one to go back to deal with him. They also weren't too strong on the point because these tank brawlers with a Moira are really difficult to deal with any hero composition, so they end up taking that quite convincingly. Now, set up to attack B, Fleta is in this dominant positioning way up here in the rafters to rain hell from above with his Junkrat. And for whatever reason, I can't really understand why, just another questionable positional switch from Fleta. He decides to try to get an alternate angle, drops down and is looking to set up a flank, but I really think he's overthinking this. NYXL don't have any dive tanks to come get him at all. He can just stand up here until he gets shot, and very likely the range spam of Junkrat is going to reign supreme over the double hit scan of NYXL, but he pays it a bit too much respect, goes for this flanking angle, and then Libero catches him out on the side, picks him off with a Helix, requiring Toby to pop his Valkyrie. Now, Arc doesn't have his Valkyrie yet, but Jonak pops Trance in order to sustain the positioning that they have, but very important that NYXL isn't just quickly moving into this fight. They wait out the Valkyrie, which is very important. Even if they have to pop Trance in order to sustain themselves, they do that. Then as this split engagement comes, where Sol tries to send some resources into the backline, then Arc pops Valkyrie. Jaehong tries to follow up on Zumba's aggression with the Transcendence, and it just goes nowhere. Both teams are healing in that spot. Jaehong's got to back off, but that just puts him into a hole, basically, for Meko's Roadhog to just go chase him down, and the team fight just starts falling apart from there. It's about how this support utility was used and when that made all the difference for NYXL. Arc using his Valkyrie later in the fight, and Jonak using his Transcendence to stabilize the positioning, whereas Ryu Jaehong uses Trance to try to keep Zumba alive, who wasn't really going to get a kill onto the McCree, who had a mercy pocket on him anyway. When the value swings of 2 full support ultimates goes so far into the other team, you're likely going to win. On top of the fact that the pick comp that NYXL is running can get burst kills anyway. As long as they stay alive and sustain, they're going to get flashbang, halt, and hook, back off cooldown, and eventually find frags with those. Whereas this dive defense that Soul's running with Fleta on the Junkrat really needs to find perfect engagements in order to work. You can't just send a tank over somewhere to attempt to fight a losing battle with a support ult pocket on the thing that you're trying to fight. It doesn't work that way. You got to find bursts of kills quickly, and it's much easier for NYXL's team comp to do, so they end up taking second as well. Going back to the tried and true, they do the quad tank. I'm not sure why Sabiolby didn't go to the Widowmaker here. Maybe he felt his mechanical performance wasn't good enough, but I think the threat of that line of sight is so lethal and useful that it probably would have been a bit better, because since there wasn't any threat from that main normal Widowmaker line of sight, well, Fleta is just allowed to stand wherever he wants and farms up his Riptire in like 30 seconds of this fight. And once he pops Riptire, really, this quad tank needs to run, because if Moira gets picked off, it's all gonna crumble. They all hang in there a bit too long. Jonak pops his Coalescence, which makes him a very easy Riptire frag, and that's just going to be all she wrote. The whole ability for quad tank to work is that Moira is largely untouchable and can put just so much meat in front of her that she can AoE heal, and it's really hard to get past them to go get her. That's the whole premise of the comp, and if you just pull the Moira out of it, well, things are going to go badly. NYXL then start to panic more or less. They go to a dive comp, but at this point, the support ult advantage is going to be so high in the Dynasty's favor that even with some pretty decent play out of the players from NYXL, it's really not going to be enough. And still somehow, they haven't found an answer for Fleta, who's just been plinking away with Junkrat mines and bombs from a distance. He farms up another Riptire, going for the backline again, this time getting both of them, and that's just going to be it. After a triumphant struggle, Dynasty take the map. We're all tied up going into control. At first, Oasis was a little bit of a head scratcher, as most fans expect Pine to come in on the control map. He hasn't lost a map yet. However, I think in hindsight, looking at how well Libero performed on the projectile beating Fleta on Eichenwald, it wasn't a question mark after that point to where their game plan was and how confident they were in Libero being able to win that duel. The first point of Oasis was incredibly back and forth, and everything came down to this last fight. Shown off screen, Libero wins the duel against Fleta mid-air again. The tanks trade out, but Zumba pops a pivotal self-destruct that nearly won the entire round. Look at this fancy footwork of Arc floating off into the distance to barely absorb the extent of the self-destruct's damage, keeping himself alive, popping Valkyrie to get back. Keep in mind, Jaehong had just been booped off the map as well, so NYXL get a Valkyrie up, Soul get a Mercy in their spawn. Jaehong rage swaps onto the Ana, but too little too late, I'm afraid, my friend. He doesn't even touch the point by the time it gets capped. DPS duels and the support battle both going into favor of NYXL to take the round. Point 2 is just as much back and forth, but at the end, NYXL failed to touch the point. Big C9, they lose the round without being able to contest. Debatably, Soul was probably set up in order to win this fight anyway, but you never know, they could have fragged out of the situation. They more or less lost the fight without even entering it. Round goes to Soul, and we're headed to round 3. If you think back to a video I made many months ago of how pros counter Pharah, this Hog Diva combination is quite an effective one because it gives 2 tank targets that both have way too much health points for Pharah to meaningfully attack, and also can possibly challenge her. Not to mention it's the game plan for Libero to largely contest the airspace battle, and you can see the fits that he must be given Fleta with this movement, so haphazard, controlling his hover so unpredictably that even when he doesn't go straight head-to-head in the duel, Fleta's getting flustered with his ability to even take Libero out of the skies. So in the end, Libero wins this duel from both ends. Either he goes at Fleta, hits his shots, or his movement is so good that he can dodge Fleta's impact while adding his own to the ground. He's won with both ways on 2 different maps now, and surely has to be frustrating for such a highly ranked Pharah player in the Overwatch League. And this last fight really shows you the struggles of trying to play Winston D.Va into this tank lineup. The problem is, you do trash damage into these tanks with no barrier. Well, they just charge up Valk. So Arc's got Valk to mirror Jaehong's in this situation anyway, but as the aggression comes in, these tanks just physically cannot fight the D.Va Roadhog. This is a massive mistake. Zumba and Kuki, I don't know where your head's at. Well, I know where it's at. It's getting blasted onto the ground by the Roadhog, Shotgun, and Whole Hog, getting crossfired survived by Mecho's Diva rockets as well. Massive crossfire. They lure in this engagement, and I don't know what the Soul tanks were thinking. They die easily here, which, yeah, you might be able to use your Valk to get them back, but having to use both of your reses immediately, while the enemy team also has Valk, means that you're at an even fight that you have to win even more convincingly, because they have 2 reses and you don't. Really poor engagement, really good catch of the aggression from NYXL, makes for a clean victory on Oasis. On to Junkertown, guys. Well, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of the Korean teams aren't very good at Junkertown, and neither of them really impressed. Both do not finish the map. Both get caught out by things they probably shouldn't have, and despite a very convincing defense and performance by the tanks of NYXL, who just constantly keep hitting these halt hook combinations to grind down the front line, Seoul eventually finds some kills in overtime and are able to snowball that a bit into Street's face for a bit of progress, but they don't get too far, and realistically they end the cart at a distance that NYXL should be able to replicate, but going on to their attack, they kind of get counter-stratted here. Seoul Dynasty run a team composition that I think they stole from the Houston Outlaws. We've seen Raucus swap onto the Roadhog from the Zenyatta position, leaving for a solo heal Mercy, and this is pretty great because it allows you to have a character that's pretty self-sustaining and can make some small flank plays on his own to get positioning on the cart, but it also gives you a ton of shield break, making it really hard for this Bastion to get set up at all. NYXL hold onto the Bastion comp for far too long, don't realize that this triple tank single support, high damage output shield break combination that they're running is really good against this Bastion setup until it's a bit too late. They get the tank form, but don't even end up using it. Jonak swaps to the Zen anyway, which is just another ult economy mistake that ended up losing them Horizon as well. One weakness they have is that they're building towards an idea and they don't realize that how much of a mistake it is to just go against it entirely. Like, they have to lean in or be able to adapt that strategy instead of abandoning everything altogether, but they just very clearly didn't know how to deal with all of this meat on the enemy team, and anytime they try to make any movement, well, Fleta could just take a peek into the backline and get a pick, and yeah, NYXL don't get even first. They get shut out of this map as well. Kind of a problem when you swap your comp with a minute and a half left and don't have any ultimates to win in the final fight, but hey, you live and you learn. We're going on to map 5. Dynasty are actually able to get first control, which should put them at a big advantage to win this round, but some insane playmaking turns the tide, which seems to be the running theme for Li Zhang maps. If a star player can just pop off, these control points really go towards the more mechanically skilled team, it seems. But Bunny gets into the backline, finds the pick onto Arc, no mercy for NYXL. Jonak already popped his Transcendence to sustain his teammates' lives, which allows them for some positioning. Sabioli finds the backline clipping down Jaehong, but the most impressive thing in all of this, because Dynasty don't play a backline dive, which they kind of can't because they have their own soldier. They have to play a controlling playstyle, and Bunny's left to more or less flank on his own. Well, there opens up these big, wide open opportunities for Jonak to pop off. We saw it on Eichenwald. We see it again here, where he hits just so many consecutive orbs that everything in front of him dies. And it doesn't matter that they don't have Arc alive. They're able to swing the man advantage so strong with sheer fragging that the defensive sustained playstyle that Seoul's going for is just not good enough, because NYXL have too many threats. Both flankers are lethal, and the Zenyatta, you don't really have an option other than just to win a fight. It's not even necessarily possible to just out-strategy that. It's like someone's got to make a play no matter what strategy you go for. Seoul actually end up taking control at the last moment, forcing NYXL to swap to a Lucio in order to speed their team comp to the point to even touch it in time, and the reluctance of Dynasty to make an aggressive dive here is really troubling, because they have the point. You know NYXL have to come get it from you, so why not put more resources into bursting down this backline? This is what Zumba's thinking of doing, but he's not even able to kill the Zenyatta because no one's there to help him. Well, what's anybody even doing? Some very split shot calling coming from the Dynasty, and they definitely took this engagement way too passive because NYXL was allowed to just run past them entirely, take the point. Nothing died on the back end for free like it should because you have the point and they can't afford to just keep fighting you. They have to run past you anyway. Really rough. The Dynasty split their decision making, and it ends up losing this entire round for them that I think they were in position to win. Whereas Cookie with his primal rage to disrupt them as they try to get to the point. And NYXL is allowed to both get the objective and the enemy's backline all in one go? It doesn't make any sense, guys. I don't know. It's a lapse in judgment, I guess. But moving on to the next round, Seoul Dynasty opened up with a Lucio, which you guys know I'm a big fan of. It really helped Boston's engagement that we covered in the Koreans Finally Lose video most recently. But Seoul's passivity while using Speed Boost, which is an aggressive ability, really is going to get them the short end of the stick in this exchange. Because NYXL have the Mercy Zen, they by far have the offensive advantage. They just simply do more damage than you do. But the way you're supposed to beat that with Lucio is getting your pieces in the right spots on the engagement. You can't speed to the engagement, play passively, get poked down from their superior firepower, and then try to res your way out of it like Toby does here. Not good. Committing to that res way out in the open just didn't work out. I really would have liked to see more aggressive, coordinated dives onto the Zenyatta. It's troubling to see that Bunny was able to farm up a pulse bomb before Jonak got attacked. Well, by then it's too late. He needed to die before he was able to kill your Mercy. So that loses them the full control of the map to start off with. And the really indecisive target priority on these engagements from Seoul is very troubling. This next one comes in and Toby, he's paying attention to what I'm saying in this post commentary, goes after Jonak right away, boops him off the mat. But after that, Seoul just seem content with trying to brawl on the point, but they have to commit to get some frags here because they let NYXL dictate the entire pace of the battle while they just pick apart whatever target they want. They're focus firing, they're burning down targets faster than Dynasty can, and the strategy to just fight on point to pull a response works to flip the objective, but this usually is the opposite of the shot calling from the Dynasty. I feel like it's 100 times that I've praised Lunatic High and Team South Korea for abandoning the objective to go win the fight. Taking the objective in this way was a massive mistake because it just fed their lives entirely to get 24%. So what? Then they lose the objective entirely, and YXL take it again, and they get one last fight to try to retake the map. They over-aggress into Jonak, who peels back, is able to get support from his teammates, and it's just a firing squad. Really weird decision making and shot calling coming out of the Dynasty, to be honest. And if their plan was to try to bait a mistake out of NYXL by putting a lot of players on the point, hoping that NYXL would trip up, well, I don't think they know who they're dealing with. I wouldn't imagine that Dynasty would continue to take engagements this way because, one, they usually are more of a hybrid team where they go defensively or offensively when it's required, but it seems just far too many times in this series they respected NYXL as if they were afraid to fight them, and it just allowed them to slowly lose fights without even having a chance. Because when NYXL didn't end up making a mistake, well, Dynasty just got whittled down. But even with the misplays, with the mistakes, with the C9s, this was a matchup for the history books. I can't wait to see these teams play again later on, either in the playoffs or whenever else they get to see each other. I think this possibly might be one of the most interesting rivalries in OWL right now. You gotta think that Dynasty don't want to lose to these boys again, but for now, NYXL are number one. What did you guys think of this pro analysis video? If you enjoyed it, please leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're going to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.
Does that make you the best team in this league now?
Of course.
Of course! There you have it! Thank you so much, Art. Thank you for this beautiful performance on the stage.